Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Our topic today, lessons learned from building next-generation customer experiences. Hard to say exactly what defines next generation, but suffice it to say that technology changes rapidly, and thus customer expectation changes rapidly. So what we're really talking about is staying ahead of the curve. And we're going to look at this challenge through the lens of our two guests. First is Rama Anaswamy. Rama is a product engineering leader focused on marketing technology stacks that accelerate digital transformation. In his current role as director of digital architecture at the Children's Place, which now includes the Gymboree brand, he was instrumental in launching the platform that powers all of their brand sites and mobile applications. Also joining us is Chang Li. Chang has over 20 years of industry experience, merging technical expertise with the business needs of clients. He has worked across multiple industries, including retail, financial services, telco, and CPG, to provide more strategic guidance and recommendations to clients and project teams. His experience runs from startups to large technology companies in both product and consulting capacities. Gentlemen, a big thank you to both of you for being here. We look forward to this conversation. A couple of notes for those watching. First, please add questions as we go to the chat box, and we will get to them at the end of the conversation. Also, you may hear us refer to the term TCP. For the record, we're probably not referring to Transmission Control Protocol. TCP stands for the Children's Place. So with that, let's jump right into it. Rama, you work with these two amazing brands. I can call them amazing because I saw firsthand how much money my wife spent on them raising our three kids. Roughly 12 months ago, you set out to make some big changes in the customer experience. If you would, walk us through your objectives at the start of the project. What was it you set out to accomplish?
Sure. We really wanted to onboard a modern digital asset management system and deliver a really experiential experience to our customers. And really the objectives were faster time to market, something that was high fidelity and also personalized, because that's a big deal for us right now. And from an overall engineering perspective, something that's performant as well. So we'll kind of unwrap that later, but essentially that's really what we set out to do. And it was an exciting journey.
Just double click for me for a second on high fidelity. I like that idea. What do you mean by high fidelity in the customer experience?
Sure, absolutely. So our devices and other mediums that we use now to view digital content has changed dramatically. There was a time when phones were like lower fidelity, we couldn't see much detail on them, but we have now Retina displays and they kind of become better year over year. The question is like, people delivering these experiences, are we kind of tuning or in some ways personalizing those experiences to these devices? So we're using the word high fidelity because we want to show the utmost amount of detail virtually. So if you think about in the apparel industry, where we want to see, like the fur, kind of the details around shiny pieces, etc. So that is kind of very, very important, and it's important to get into the details when you're trying to sell something like a piece of clothing to a customer. So we struggled with this historically before we utilized a digital asset management system like Cloudinary. Like we had very limited capacity of showing these experiences. Everything had to be done beforehand. And that changed dramatically as we kind of looked at delivery as a medium and looking at experiences that were different based on whether you're looking at a phone or like a 4K monitor. You'd be amazed at the type of things that we can do depending on the circumstances.
Excellent. I love that. I love that point of view. So Chang, Publicis Sapient sees many customers with similar objectives to build this next generation experience. What does next generation mean to you, and how would you define success?
Thank you, Scott, first of all, for that very generous introduction. And me personally, I don't claim to be smart or creative, and by no means experienced experts. So I'm going to quote someone who is really smart, our Chief Experience Officer, John Maeda. And John characterized a successful experience as 4 letters. It is spelled as LEAD, lead. So that basically means a customer experience has to be lightful. And lightful meaning it's a simple, it's a responsive, it's nimble, and it's performant. It has to be ethical. So it has to be purposeful, honest, and useful and unbiased. I can't emphasize this point more than ever, given the general environment that we're in. The Occupy Wall Street, the 1% conversations, the Me Too movement, and even just recently the issue we have with George Floyd. So all of this means as a user experience has to be firmly grounded in ethical ground. The next one is accessible. That means that the experience has to be contextual, has to be empathetic, and at the very minimum has to support people of all abilities, right? So that's the accessible part of it. And lastly, certainly not the least, it has to be dataful. That means the experience is measurable and it will generate and rely on insight derived from the data we collect from the user interfaces. So that summarizes as the success factor for a really great experience. That's light, ethical, accessible, and dataful. LEAD for short. In this case, I am an engineer, so I'm going to add something to this. I'm going to say a great experience has to be adaptable as well. This is from the engineering side of things. The solution has to be, from architectural perspective, resilient. The changes are easy. Engineering process to produce this experience has to be agile, has to be fully automated, and there's a quality assurance built into the engineering process. So ultimately, I think the best user experience is the one that's positive, that's engaging to the customer, that brings the value to the customer, right? And in today's world where we're living in the world of Instagram and TikTok, I guess the content is king, as Bill Gates once quoted in his, 1996 essay. Everybody understands a picture is worth 1,000 words. I just want to emphasize the importance of video as well. We're seeing a general trend. People are getting their information. People are more engaged with a short video than anything else from a content perspective, right? I don't know today how many people actually go read a recipe in a recipe book, or they just go to YouTube and look up how people prepare for a meal. So that's the kind of consumers we're dealing with on a regular basis. So when we're considering the best user experience, content is king. It has to follow the basic principles of a successful user experience. And amongst the content, image and the video are very important since we're at the ImageCon, right?
Yep. Good. I know. I like that. I like that structure. I like that framework. Maybe we take the acronym LEAD and put A in front of that lead for adapt. Talk about the pace of change, and couldn't agree more. It is so fast that if you don't have adaptability, you got a problem. Rama, images and videos obviously play a huge role in the customer experience. What is most challenging about digital media, and how do you think broadly about addressing these challenges?
Sure. I think there are multiple areas of challenges from a customer perspective. I think Chang touched a little bit about the expectations changing quite a bit and the adaptability. I think that's a very important point there. So for me, from a customer perspective, they're looking for, like we touched upon, that the theme of higher fidelity. They want multiple options to look at the same product in different ways. The other day I was looking at it as an example, like a chair that was placed via AR on a surface, and it kind of gives you that much more detail than you can ever look at in any other form of media. So they're always kind of seeing these experiences in other places and virtually demanding that information. So that's kind of the important thing from a customer perspective. And then from a content creator perspective, they want a much greater kind of control of the workflow. So they want anything that they produce today to be immediately visible in the end experience that they want, and they want it at the time of how it looks like when it's with the touch point with the customer. So that's kind of the key thing here. So gone are the days where you could just quickly prototype. The prototype is pretty much in production these days, where you kind of put it out there, and the creative teams and we're essentially working with, as an engineering team, the team is working directly with like studio teams, etc., which is unheard of. Like there would be layers of other content coordinators, etc., in the piece, but now we're working directly. We're producing these experiences, giving them other environments to experience these things firsthand. So that's a lot of the demand or the ask that's coming from content creators, and I see platforms adapting to that request quite quickly. So we're not there's no wall. Like essentially early on, it used to be like an operational exercise, so everything would be done offhand in a production studio, which is an entirely different environment. And then when it goes in our experiences or channels, it's completely different. But now all those barriers are gone, thanks to some of the platforms that are showing up. So that's the content creator view. But they also want a lot of, I think Chang touched upon it, video as an example. So there's a lot of different types of videos that are kind of showing up. I have experience in automotive as well as apparel industries, and especially like speaking of retail apparel, there's a lot of we're talking 360, we're talking like on figure. There's a lot of different types of experiences that they are coming up with, and then you just need to make sure that those are efficiently produced, deliverable to different from an adaptability perspective on different mediums that the customers are viewing. So I think that's basically what's happening at the customer and content creator space. But as platform operators, somebody who runs a website, runs the app, or is putting up like an Instagram picture, what we want is essentially the stability of that solution. Like once we deliver it, it should work seamlessly across all of these channels. So that responsibility has essentially quadrupled based on different formats that we are seeing, as well as the channels and the different requirements. Essentially, like if you're Instagram, your portrait, the aspect ratios are dramatically different than what if you're on Facebook, etc., or on your site even. There's like 3 ways to view the same asset or media. So, and then from a cost perspective, this is key, right? Like, when we are platform owners, cost cannot increase with the customer demand. So that's one area that we're seeing as more people move to look at media online versus on stores, etc. Like we're seeing surges in traffic. So massive amounts of traffic moving online. Now, how do we kind of get this media to our end customers without the associated cost quadrupling? Because normally that's not looked at as, in this relationship is kind of questionable of like, if your traffic increases 10 times, should your operational cost of the platform increase 10 times as well? So that's a highly debatable area. So there's multiple challenges depending on, what you want to deliver, how you want to deliver it, who's trying to kind of put that media out, and eventually like the economic cost of running a platform there as well.
And I'm just kind of curious, sort of order of magnitude, when you talk about number of assets, you got increase in number of asset types, you've got the channels that you refer to, form factors that advice that they're going to, increased throughput as customer expectation for new product continues. How many assets generally are you talking about having to manage for your brands?
So it's a difficult question to answer, because we essentially, for every product, it has like multiple media types associated with it. It could be, if you take any SKU that we have, we could essentially end up having like 3 what we call as the lifestyle image, which is what you initially see, and then alternate images. There could be a video associated with it. There could be an international asset that is for international markets. There could be something that is associated for banners and huge prints. So there's a multiplier. That's why I hesitate to give a number out.
Hundreds of thousands of SKUs becomes millions of assets, correct?
Exponential, and it has to be maintained. And recently, what we've started to look at is to maintain some of these products for eternity, like just holding on to products that we historically produced because they might just suddenly come back into fashion, or there might be demand for them. There's a huge secondhand market that's going on as well. So now these assets have to be archived and kept for eternity as well. So it's exponential. So it's not just our current catalog of products that we sell on our site today. It's historical. So
eternity. I like that quote. Assets must be kept for eternity. That's a long time. Okay, we're talking millions, tens of millions of assets. So Chang, related question. The challenges are not they're not just customer challenges. They are engineering challenges, creative content development challenges, marketing challenges. How should management of digital assets take into consideration such a broad set of stakeholder interests?
Yeah, Scotty, you're absolutely right. A solution like a digital media management has to address the concerns from all stakeholders, from engineers to creative folks to business. I think if we have a North Star where everybody look towards and this problem will be a little easier to solve. I think the North Star in all of this is the customer centricity. All of these folks, whether it's engineering, it's creative folks, or business people, marketers, they all should organize themselves around customer centricity, and the digital media management solution has to support that North Star, right? So to some extent, the stakeholders are also customers of a digital media management solution too. So they collaborate on the customer experience and on the delivery of positive, engaging customer experience in their journey, whether it's an engineer, it's a creative person, or it's a marketer, right? In their journey, there are moments that matter for each of the stakeholders. From an engineer's perspective, I'm an engineer, so I'm going to speak for the engineers first. I think the moments that matter is how difficult it is for me to integrate the solution into my product. So the ease of integration. Is the architecture conducive to what I'm trying to build? I'm trying to engineer a modern solution. Is this a solution, to be more exact, is it cloud enabled? Is it cloud native? How easy it is for me to make my architecture work in conjunction with the digital media solution? And is the engineering process similar to what I'm used to? How do I integrate the digital media management solution into my CI/CD pipeline and other aspects of my engineering process? And from maintenance and operations perspective, how difficult it is to operate it? Do I have to carry a pager and get paged at 4 o'clock in the morning because the system is act up, or is this a completely turnkey? I don't have to worry about it. It's like utility, right? You just pay your bills and it comes every month. And the next one is when it comes to the system's performance, and when I'm delivering content to my customer, is the system capable of supporting a highly performant, scalable delivery mechanism for my needs? So that's the engineers' needs. Those are the moments that matter to the engineers. From a creative folks' perspective, it's a very collaborative process. Is there some level of ease of use and facilitate the creative folks to collaborate on these digital assets and to manage them, to keep track of them? From business folks' perspective, the ability to adapt to marketing needs, how hard it is to take an idea which is supported by digital media and put them into marketplace to test the potential targeted consumers or customers, and how easy it is can I get this into the marketplace. I think Rama also mentioned this thing of return of investment, how easy it is for me to sign up for this service. Am I forking over half of the farm, so to speak, to engage a particular engagement, or can I at least initially put the whole thing on credit card and try it first before I get started? So these are, I think, very important for the business folks. Oh. So all of this, ultimately, it goes back to the user experience, which is the most human aspect of it. The user experience for engineers, for creative folks, and for marketers and business people. And they collectively deliver a outstanding user experience to their customers as well.
Chang, you make it sound so easy. Rahma, you've been living this life, right? Change doesn't happen that easy. How hard has it been for you to align stakeholder interests as you've advanced this effort cross-functionally?
Yeah, I mean, was that for me?
Yeah. How
Okay.
hard has it been for you? That's a lot to manage. That's a lot of stakeholders.
It's interesting. Like, I think we migrated from a disjointed system. Essentially, like, we had systems that people didn't think through. It worked. It was working when we started, but I don't think through the journey or the process everyone was satisfied. Like that's how it is was how we started into it. And people are open to change, but they just didn't know what needed to happen. So as an example, like we talked about it, we had these offline scripts that would perform some magic, but nobody knew who owned the script or who needed to maintain it. So there were like low level issues like that, where how does an asset get from production all the way to a particular point in a web server or any place else. So there was a bit of a mystery there, multiple touch points. People just, you could see that there was like at a point of time request where it was just met, like you just met that particular request, and that's how the system came about. We kind of went back into the drawing board sometimes, even before we looked at what the platform capabilities were, just looking at ourselves and just noting down what happens today as just anecdotal information from participants is how we put together what is happening today. And from that, we derived what we needed it to be. And a lot of it we based on platform capabilities because it was out of the box. It was, best practices. We involved, the people who designed the platforms themselves to talk about how others do it. So that a lot of it was there. But ultimately, what it came down to is the participants in the system. So we had to do a couple of things. One, making sure everyone thought of it as a short-term and a long-term goal, because it can be, if you don't break it apart, it just gets too much, right? So we intentionally started over a period of time what was called as a digital asset management project. We started calling it as a phase one. And by putting in that nomenclature, that vocabulary, it gave a lot of kind of, Chang mentioned a North Star. That gave us our North Star for like a MVP kind of an area where we part a lot of good things that we ultimately needed to do, but essentially making sure that we don't forget what we need to do at the end of the, what's the end objective of this exercise. So from a pushback perspective, of course, people are, do not see change equally. Like not everyone sees change equally. I don't want to say they see it negatively or as a challenge. A lot of people were super excited. Like some teams essentially that we didn't know even existed in the company came out to us saying, we've heard through the grapevine that you're doing a digital asset management system. And right now we kind of email each other images, and it sounds like you can improve our life by taking that away. So, requests like that, and then other places where we had pushback, where we don't want to change a thing that we're doing. If you're dropping a file to a folder, we do want to continue doing that. There is, we don't see the reason to log in into an application and hit that upload button. In those cases, we customize the platform to meet those needs. Like, I think that was a lot of it was humbling to kind of, go through across some of that, exercises and conversations, because they were tough. So while we look back, essentially it all looks, an upgraded kind of an experience. Chang spoke about user experience. So it's an upgraded user experience for the participants. But through the process, in many cases, we modified the platform or customized, the touch points that these teams had to meet what they were doing already and what was more comfortable. So I think it needs to be looked at carefully from that perspective. So those were some of the challenges. And in the end, one thing that Chang referred to is very, very interesting. Like the customers are the collaborators as well in this exercise. They may not present themselves right next to you, but a lot of the feedback, one of the things we did was to look back at feedback, some of our ratings and reviews on the site, and about the quality of, what I saw isn't what I got, essentially, is the reverse of what you see is what you get. So a lot of the reviews kind of spoke about how it was represented, and some of it went to, how it was being shot in the studios, to how it was when they actually received the product, it was completely different. That still will continue, but I feel like by taking more, putting the focus on how the imagery is shot and presented, and not overly compressed, like skin tones are completely faded out because somebody decided to apply a 90% compression, is something that we also considered. So we considered it completely from, who's operating, again, who's experiencing this, and how the entire system works.
Yeah. Good points of view, and I think that's a lot of stakeholders' interest to bring along. But I love the idea that you use the customer as the touchstone to refer back to keep you all aligned in the end. Quick reminder to our viewers: any questions you have, please enter them into the chat box, and we will get to them shortly. So just switching gears a little bit, and Rama, I'm going to turn to you again. Near and dear to the subject of customer experience, what is your perspective on the importance of personalization? Do you have a roadmap, and how you'd like to enhance the experience at TCP Gymboree as it relates to personalization?
Yeah. So personalization is a huge deal and a milestone for us. We're trying to, our CEO has called out that personalization is pretty important as an objective for the organization. The way I view personalization, as kind of stated like a mission statement, is like if you go into a store real time, whenever we can get to one next time, and as we slowly reopen, we experience it at a personal level, right? The salesperson pays kind of attention to you, even though it's a shared space where multiple customers are present. Depending on the salesperson and the store, you sometimes feel you're all alone in the store and you're being taken care of, right? So there's obviously a wait, but it's a one-to-one interaction. Now, when you come to the digital shared spaces, the idea to kind of the personalization should be at that level. So that's kind of the kind of the objective that when I speak to teams that are implementing personalization, not just on the digital media space, but also when we deliver experiences, that's how I refer it to them. So we need to kind of deliver these experiences at a one-to-one way. So even though they might be in a digital shared kind of, they're always talking to them based on what their needs are. And it's kind of powerful. It's a simple concept to explain, but essentially like a lot of the experience that we see designed is very, very broad. It tries to capture a lot of different people together in one shot. Chang spoke about accessibility. To me, that is also a level of personalization where you're kind of catering to specific needs, and the spaces that we operate should be friendly to those people. So essentially, the idea for us is to personalize at the one-to-one level. That's really how I view it. Specifically speaking to media, we've discovered, like, once we set that as the kind of the cornerstone, a lot of use cases and requirements came out of it where we started speaking specifics. Because when you're speaking to an engineer, it's great to state a mission statement, but they want to know, what does that mean, right? So when the rubber hits the road, what we want to do is to figure out, like, what does this mean from when I'm displaying this imagery, this video, like, what are we doing? So we're exploring those kind of use cases right now as we understand how their behavior is, who they are, etc., from understanding some of the pieces of that information. So yes, I mean, I think it's a huge deal. It's something we're still continuing to think. I don't think we've nailed it. I do think we're on our way though.
And then Chang, in the context of the e-commerce experience, what kind of advice does Publicis Sapient give its clients with regards to personalization?
Scott, I think it's kind of interesting you asked me this question. A little of an anecdote. I started my career more than 2 decades ago at IBM, and at the time I was working on today, nowadays known as HCL Commerce. It was known as WebShare Commerce prior to that, Net.Commerce. I'm completely dating myself here. I remember my very first assignment. It was working on the personalization function in marketing. It feels like after 20 years, we're still trying to crack that nut. But obviously, over the course of 20 years, personalization has changed a lot. I think from our perspective, the foundation of personalization is about to deliver the right content or experience to the right person at the right time in the right place. Fundamentally, it is based on business understanding of a customer's needs, right? So in the past 20 years, the level of understanding has increased the leap and bounds. So if we were to have some advice for our clients in the context of e-commerce, we would say, understand your customers at an individual level. The customer profile, the segmentation is probably not sufficient these days to have the kind of personalization consumers expect. So understand your customers at an individual level, gather as much data about your customers as you can, because that's a foundation for you to derive any sort of insight about the customer. Nowadays, there are many modern tools available to you now. In addition to the typical attribute-based, customer demographics thing, we now have statistical models which are leaning towards more predictive way of telling what a customer behavior is going to be. Machine learning, AI, they're really hot trends. They have found huge use in personalization, and these kind of techniques will help translate the data you have about the customers into insights and into actions, right? So lastly, I also want to add is measure everything. Measure everything. When you personalize something, you have to keep an eye for the KPIs that actually matter for your business. And things in the e-commerce world, like average order value, conversion rate, your shoppers' RFM scores, those are the things that can potentially be affected by personalization. Measure. Don't walk into a situation with a fixed mindset. Keep open, stay curious, test and learn. Try one personalization technique, make sure it moves the needle. If it doesn't, move on, try something else. It's a complex world. Always stay curious.
Yep, that's good. Good advice. Rama, obviously, it's an ongoing process. But if you had to do it over again, anything you would have done differently?
Well, you always go in the middle, and you always think, or towards the end, you look back and you're like, maybe we should have started this earlier, right? Or maybe we should have. And so hindsight, as usual, is what it was. So for us, it was a lot of, as we got to the middle of it and everyone was warmed up, truly, like I'm talking about internal team stakeholders, we're not customer facing yet, but even partners that, who understood like the quantum of stuff we had to do. And those partners had to reach out to their own partners. Essentially, what we ended up having is a lot of different threads that were open, all seemed equally important. So I think some of that thinking we had hindsight on, but we chose to follow certain pathways first just to kind of make it realistic. But I would have started it early, and then having the understanding of, all stakeholders and impacted parties early on would be something that I think we could have done differently. And also the fact that we could have rolled out things far more earlier to learn from them. I think that's another piece that we are still, we still think we could have done better. As an example, from a video delivery perspective, I remember even going closer to our launch date, we were still tweaking stuff. That's because we started with, just a static media initially, and then video was somewhere in the middle, just by virtue of how things were queued. But we could have started video, which was, much more earlier into the picture, because it had a lot of different aspects to it, including formats, streaming, uploads, like what size. We had to work with a lot of different stakeholders, and it was just not an engineering ask, it was also a production change for them. A lot of the time, something as simple as aspect ratios, as I was talking about, while we solved for that in static images, video, it became like a whole new ball game, because we had social teams that would post it on different medias, etc., and they needed completely different kind of output formats, which we didn't know of. So we were doing a lot of last minute stuff as usual. But I remember a quote that I saw in one of the offices, that nothing would get done if it went for the last minute, in one of the offices that I had. So that truly turned out for this project as well. But yeah, I think starting early, having it, go wide early on with like all the aspects that you would want to do is especially useful. That way you have a backlog of things to look at, and then you can focus on it. It seems generic advice for any project, but somehow we never follow it. So
good. I love that. Thank goodness for the last minute. I'm going to use that one. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Great insight, great advice. Really appreciate your time. And to our viewers, thank you for joining us again. Questions in the chat box, and we're going to turn there now to answer some of your questions. Okay, well, thank you, Chang and Rama, but unfortunately for our listeners, in the last few milliseconds, we lost Rama, who won't be able to join us for the Q&A portion of our session. So Rama, we already miss you, but you know what happens to the guy who's not in the room for the meeting? You'll get assigned all of the follow-up items. So you're off the hook on that, Chang, but you are on the hook for questions. Before I switch to a handful of live questions, what I thought I'd do is share with everyone just a handful of sound bites from your responses to the question thus far. So here are some that I thought were great takeaways from what we heard from Rama. Content creators behind the customer experience demand 4 things: fidelity, speed, control, and choice. Asset counts can grow exponentially, and you should plan on maintaining them for eternity. Don't try to do everything once. Break your customer experience improvement initiatives into manageable pieces and bring stakeholders along for the ride. You have to think about your customers as collaborators. And although nothing would get done if it weren't for the last minute, start early. And then Chang, from you, sound bites I grabbed were: a well-designed customer experience needs to be adaptable, lightful, ethical, accessible, and dataful. Some good creative words there. And the best way to align multiple stakeholders is to treat the customer as the North Star. The user experience is the human experience. Personalization requires personal insight. Know your customer, measure everything, and stay curious. So, Chang, let me begin with this question. It's something we didn't touch on, but it's a question a lot of folks have, which is, how has the COVID-19 situation over the last 5 months influenced your thinking about the pace of change to the customer experience?
Scott, that's really a great question. I think that's probably a question on most of the customer experience leaders' mind. The short answer for that one is it has certainly greatly accelerated the pace of change in customer experience. I remember seeing this survey out there. It was kind of interesting one. People were asking, who is the biggest driver for digital transformation within your organization? The options are your CEO, your CIO, your CMO, and the fourth answer is COVID-19. And the answer was overwhelmingly COVID-19. So there are a number of factors, in my personal opinion, that's accelerating the changes in customer experience. I think the first one is there's certainly behavior change, right? In some of our clients at Publicis Sapient, we're seeing, for example, in the sales channel, we're seeing a huge shift from the traditional sales channel to digital channels. And this kind of change may not be temporary. Once people shifted from one channel to the other, there is a fundamental behavior change. That change may be permanent. So the changes, the pace of change in transforming this organization to a more digital-focused organization within the context of COVID-19 may not be something that's optional. It may become a matter of survival. It's mandatory for organization. So that's a behavior change. The second one is, as we're all human beings, what transpired in the past few months represents a unprecedented period in the history of us as a species. And it's a period of very high emotions. And there's negative ones where it's uncertainty, it's a fear, it's anxiety. And there's also the positive ones, which is people shining through in the situation of difficulty. So from a customer experience perspective, as a brand, if your customer experience could add to that a positive feeling, and it could eliminate some of those negative feelings people are experiencing at this time, is going to change people's attitude towards you. And it's a matter of a customer loyalty. So that's from an emotional perspective, second driver. There's also a moral driver as well, because you guys are fully aware of the accessibility in the LEAD framework we introduced earlier in the conversation. Accessibility is to ensure people of all abilities to have access to various touch points, whether various channels, access to the brand. Given that some of the traditional channels are becoming, in some cases, not feasible for some of us, I think the change in making the solution more accessible to everyone becomes a very important mandate that brands should take on. It's our social responsibility. And lastly, in terms of the pace of change, another driver is the changed ways of working. This harkens back to the adaptability part of it. When COVID-19 hits, behaviors of customers have changed. How soon can you start up services like curbside pickup? And how can you shift your workforces from a traditional on-premise to a digital fulfillment process? All becomes really important. So those are all the drivers behind, I think, the significant acceleration in changes of the customer experience.
Thank you. Cheng, you also touched on personalization. One of the summary points was, know your customer. Another question related to personalization is privacy. Mm-hmm. How do you strike a balance between personalization and concerns for individuals' privacy?
That's a really great question. I think in the era of the big tech, the scandal of Cambridge Analytica, I think people are paying close attention to the privacy issue, how much a brand knows about me, how much the brand can leverage the information they have about me, in what way they're going to leverage it, become quite a significant concern for consumers. The California Consumer Privacy Act, and all the regulations in different jurisdictions are all highlighting people's concerns and anxieties about privacy. In my mind, at the end of the day, we said that the customer is the North Star. Customer centricity is what we should aim for. So at the end of the day, it's a matter of what information you have about your customers. How do you leverage it? Are you leveraging it in a way where it's ethical? It brings value to your customers in a way where it's generally accepted by your client? Are you being transparent with your client about what you know and what you don't know about them? Are you giving them options to let you have access to certain parts of the data? The rights to be forgotten becomes a really important aspect as well. So those are all, in my mind, the importance and the areas of concern when it comes to privacy in personalization. And if we have to summarize it in one word, don't be creepy.
Don't be creepy. I'll keep that one in mind.
Yeah.
Okay, and then switching gears a little bit, you talked about the incredible pace of change, right? Technology is obviously one of those things driving that change. What is your point of view on the importance of AI in the development and delivery of the customer experience?
Oh, it's just a fad. It's going to blow over any time now. I hope you get it. It's a joke. And my friends always tell me, don't tell a joke. I better keep my day job. So Scott, AI's impact on personalization and on customer experience is very profound change, right? When I talked about my experience, my career development, I started with personalization at IBM around 20 years ago. At that time, the kind of things we can leverage to build customer experience and to personalize the customer experience is limited to attributes. So demographic informations, people's age group, geolocations, and whatnot. But from an AI perspective, today the changes are pretty profound in a number of areas. First, I think when you're interacting with the customers in the channels you're interacting with the customer, there's a significant number of opportunities when it comes to artificial intelligence, from natural language processing to voice interactions. Those are new channels, new opportunities. So that opened up more touch points with the customer for a brand. And the second area is your understanding of a customer is going to be significantly enhanced by your AI and machine learning capabilities. We just touched base on the data issue, the privacy issue. Today, I think we have so much data about a customer. There is a statistics about in the past 2 years, we've generated 90% of all the data we've ever had in the history of humankind. And that's just data. But AI and machine learning gives us the opportunity to derive insight out of that data. And then the insight can help you identify the right time, the right content, and the right place to communicate with a customer to help bring value to the customer. There's another aspect of AI, which I think is also kind of interesting. I'm watching that personally, which is, as an engineer, artificial intelligence has got to a point where it's changing the way we work. I don't know if you are aware, as a designer, front-end developer, sometimes, it's unavoidable. You start to bring up your laptop, start to code a user interface based on the designs, a framework of some sorts. But there are artificial intelligence capabilities out there which the technology can just watch your designs on a whiteboard and translate that to a code, which you can enhance at a later time. So it potentially could change the way we deliver our experience to our customer as well. So long story short, in my personal opinion, I think this time, unlike the previous times where AI became really hot topics, this time it's here to stay. It's going to have a profound impact on customer experience, on our understanding of customers' behavior, and tailor our experience to our customers.
Yeah, at Cloud & Area, we couldn't agree more. We think that artificial intelligence is a critical part of how every application ultimately gets delivered in the future. And I guess it touches back to your point, don't be creepy. A lot of creepy things being done with artificial intelligence. Sensitive to time here, let me just ask you one more question, one final question, and it relates to the relationship between marketing teams and engineering teams. How do you think that relationship should exist? We're seeing it come closer and closer, and wondered from your perspective, what are your thoughts on the nature of that relationship?
I think that's a really great question. I think the paradigm has to shift when it comes to the marketing team and the engineering team. I think when we ask ourselves, what should be the relationship between engineering team and the marketing team, we probably framed that question incorrectly already. No offense to you, Scott. I feel like, the way to achieve the adaptability we talked about, or to some extent the agility, a cross-functional team between marketing, product, and delivery is the way to go. So it's a mentality shift from two separate teams, where the marketing team focus on marketing activities, worry about the business, where the engineering teams focus on delivering. That's changed, where we have today, the ideal operational model should be a closely integrated team that interacts on a daily basis. People often use the term a product team, right? So they will be interacting with one another, and it's the same set of priorities, the same set of principles, the same kind of North Star that drives a cross-disciplined team. So you will start to see the boundaries between marketing and engineering start to disappear. You're going to get into small pods of like-minded people from different disciplines working together, delivering on business results.
Makes a lot of sense. Cheng, thank you so much for your time, for your insights. Rama, thank you to you. Sorry we missed you for the Q&A portion. From everybody at Cloudinary, thank you to all of our listeners. This concludes our session. The session will be posted on the ImageCon site, along with, starting shortly, 10 of the sessions from earlier in the week, so you can access from them as well. Thank you from Cloudinary to everybody, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.